Welcome to the Superstar Communicator Show. My name is Susan Heaton-Wright. I'm a vocal coach and communications trainer. Through listening to this podcast, my goal is to ensure you never ever be underestimated, ignored, interrupted, or undervalued again. Listen fortnightly as I share proven tips and strategies to ensure you develop charisma and make an impact with your voice and physical presence. Make sure to subscribe for free updates on how to be a superstar communicator at executivevoice.co.uk. Hi there, everybody. This is Susan Heaton-Wright from Superstar Communicator. Thank you very, very much for tuning in today, and in particular to those people who have fed back to me that they are listening to this podcast whilst they are learning English or executive business English. The feedback I've had is that my English is very clear and they're getting a lot out of it. Thank you very much for that feedback. As a Brummie born and bred, that is hilarious to hear that my English is so clear, but I'm so pleased. Anyway, I am very, very excited. You know what I'm like when I have a guest on? Always excited, but I'm particularly excited with this guest. She specializes in preparing entrepreneurs and business professionals to pitch and present with clarity, confidence, and charisma. She's an award-winning speaker with a diverse career history in the corporate world. She has worked as a presenter, singer, and actor, including several appearances on the Aussie soap Neighbours. I had no idea about that. Respect. Her first book, The Authority Guide to Pitching Your Business, How to Make an Impact and Be Remembered in Under a Minute, was published in 2017. And she's one of only 2 professional Speaking Association fellows based in Scotland. Today, she'll be sharing some of the communication tips she's developed over 25 years in business and a lifetime of being on stage. So please welcome Mel Sherwood.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on, Susan. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay, so am I. And I can't believe you were on Neighbours.
Well, it was many moons ago. It's kind of my claim to fame over here in the UK, because in Australia no one really cares. But in the UK, it obviously has, or people of a certain age,
yes,
shall we say, remember Neighbours. So it was sort of the late 90s when I had a few different roles. I never had one long permanent role on Neighbours, but I had several different appearances as different characters. So yeah, there we are.
The summer uniform, you know, those little dresses that they all wear when they went to school.
Yes.
Oh, did you really?
I didn't. I wasn't. No. When I was on it, I wasn't a school girl. Although I did wear the similar. So I grew up in Melbourne, where Neighbours is filmed, and yeah, my area is very similar to where Neighbours is filmed. So that's really familiar to me. And yes, I did used to wear school dresses like that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, when I was actually in it, I played a nurse, a receptionist, a shop owner, various different roles. So yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. But you've got some amazing background experience. But one thing that we are wanting to chat about today is about TEDx talks.
Yes.
And I know that this is something that you are empowering people to do. Could
Absolutely.
you say more about that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I got involved with TEDx when I used to live in a place in Edinburgh called Portobello by the beach, and the local organisation decided that they would put on a TEDx event. So I was all very excited about that, and I got in touch with. I saw it on Twitter to start with, and I got in touch with the organizer and said, I'd really love to be involved in this. It was quite early in my business, and I we had some communication, and I ended up being their speaker coach for that year. They had 10 speakers. So I
Fantastic.
coached all of the speakers, and then from that, and interestingly enough, from that I've had lots and lots of other different work. But one in particular that it led to was working then with Edinburgh University TEDx event, and
Yes.
I've also worked with Glasgow TEDx event, and I've done a few coaching jobs on that, and that's a really big one. There's 2,000 people in the audience versus the first one at Portobello had 60 people in the audience.
Oh
So
yeah.
really interesting that, you know, they're quite diverse in the style of event and the approach and the resources that they have behind them to work with. So yeah, I've kind of seen it from a very small scale to a very big scale, and been fortunate to be able to support speakers in all of those events.
Oh, that's amazing. And I know that there are going to be some of our listeners who might be interested in having the opportunity to either apply for a TEDx or to speak in a TEDx. So what is special about a TEDx event?
I think it depends on the actual TEDx event. So obviously, and I don't know how much your listeners know about TED, the main event, but TEDx is where the local communities pull together and create a local event. And normally they'll choose a theme. So if you're thinking about applying, you need to think about how what you want to speak about fits with that theme. And for example, I know Glasgow TEDx, the most recent one, had more than 300 applications, and they only had about 5 to 8 speaker slots available.
Gosh.
So they're very hard to get into, some of them, especially some of the bigger ones, and that's where a lot of people would like to speak. But whether it's a big event or a small event, it still gets filmed and it still potentially ends up online. And it depends what your reason for doing a TEDx talk is. And for some people it's about exposure, and for some people it's to help their business, although the rules of TEDx are that you can't promote your business, you can't have your website or any information about your business on slides and that sort of thing. But once you have the footage of your TEDx talk, obviously you can point people to that to promote what you're doing. One of the other reasons that people do TEDx is because they have a really powerful message that they want to share, and quite often some of the best TEDx talks are based on those personal experiences. And it's been such an honor to work with people who, are maybe sharing a really deep personal story for the first time ever, and to be able to actually work with them and look at how to craft that story in a way that's going to fit the time frame. And that's the other big challenge with TEDx events, is that you quite often get a very small time frame. TED talks are 18 minutes, but quite often the TEDx events make them shorter. So I've worked with people who have been doing a 15-minute talk or even a 10-minute talk. So it's a little challenging sometimes to refine that message so that it's a powerful talk in that very short time frame.
Well, that's interesting. And I think you made a really good point about the motivation for somebody doing a TEDx talk. Have you had people that are just doing it for vanity, or do they have it in their heart that they want to share something specific?
I think maybe there's an element of vanity, and that's probably more so, and dare I say it, in the world of professional speakers. But
Whoops, I'm not going to cut that.
But because there is some kudos to have been able to say, oh, I'm a TEDx speaker, and people quite often drop the X and say I'm a TED speaker, which TED is a very different ball game, because you need to be invited by the organizers of TED, and it's a very, very different approach. But being able to say I've done a TEDx talk, because it's becoming more and more popular and more people know about TEDx talks, it's quite impressive to people who don't do talks when you say, oh, I'm a TEDx speaker. And it's nice to be able to point people to the link for them to watch it.
Yes.
There's a little bit of vanity in there, but I think most people who want to do a TEDx talk have a message to share, and whether that's about the environment or about their work in robotics or climate change or personal stories about overcoming adversity, people have different motivations. But I think at the end of the day, if a talk can move an audience or change their thinking in some way, then it's done its job.
Yes, that's a really good point. You talked about the fact that there is a time constraint. How would you be able to get somebody who's obviously got a good story, a good message, but it's clearly a 30-minute talk? How do you get them to hone it down to 12 minutes?
Lots of questions to start with, and it's interesting. I've got a blog post I can give your listeners a link to, actually, which sort of talks about my process, because the key element, the key starting point for any talk, whether it's a TEDx talk or a presentation or anything, any kind of communication, I suppose, is to clarify your objective. What is it that you want your audience to think, feel, or do at the end of the talk? And in my experience, that takes longer than actually writing the talk sometimes.
Yeah.
It's because there's so much work to do to really hone. Sometimes people just know it. They know exactly what it is. They've got it in a sentence, and that's what you need to do. What's the premise? What is the take-home message? What is it that, as I said, what you want your audience to think, feel, or do? And sometimes I ask that question in 20 different ways, because as soon as I ask it in another way, people will go off on another tangent and say, oh, well, it's sort of about this or it's about that. But unless you have one clear message, the talk will be watered down.
Yes.
And if you're not clear about it, your audience never will be. So you have to spend the time working through it and getting clearer and clearer and clearer. And once you've got that, then it's easier to think about, okay, well, then how will I structure it? And
yes.
What things will I put in? But until you've got it very clear on what that message is, you'll never be able to get it into the time frame. So it's crucial to spend the time doing that.
And listeners, I would imagine that Mel's post would be very, very useful if you've got a presentation with a limited amount of time, to start using that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the post that I was talking about is more about my process for helping people come to that crystal clear objective.
Right.
So it's less about the structure, but I'm happy to share information about structure as well. But for TEDx, quite often incorporating stories really work very effectively. It might be useful to have some links for your listeners about different styles of TEDx talks as well, that they could look at and see sort of what, get some ideas on how to structure it.
Yeah.
But it depends whether it's a talk about a personal experience, or if it's presenting research, then it's going to be a slightly different approach. But even still, so you still need to make it personal, make it relatable to people.
Now, I've watched a few TEDx talks, and I'm always amazed by the variety of ways people start their talk.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are in the business of communication, and those first few seconds can really make a difference. Do you have any tips for starting the talk?
Yes, you need an attention-grabbing opening. So you need to hook the audience in some way, and very early on, you need to give them a very good reason why they should listen.
Yes.
So that's generally where I start, and there's different ways that you can do that, but the element of surprise is always an effective way. Some people use a quote, some people will ask a question, even if it's a rhetorical question, but telling a short story, setting the scene in some way, or even using props as a bit of a surprise element can be really powerful as well.
That's interesting. I always remember one of my clients said that he went to an internal conference that was set up a little bit like a TEDx. So the speakers all had 10 minutes and they were senior people within this global organization. And clearly they'd had the same trainer, and every single one started, when I was a boy, when I was a girl, when my grandma was a girl.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's quite interesting because it's similar. I do obviously a lot of work with people who are pitching for funding and investment. So
Yes.
they're generally startups or scale up businesses, and there's a bit of a joke around the fact that a lot of people start with the word imagine.
Oh,
Imagine a situation when, and it's a great way to start because by using the word imagine, you're actually co-creating a story in people's minds.
yes.
That's how people get engaged. That's how you get them connected. But when everybody does it, it can
Yes.
be, yeah, absolutely. But even questions, and there's a way that I learned actually from Patricia Fripp. Have you met Patricia? She's a
No.
very well-known presentation and sales skills trainer in the States. She's actually British but lives in America, and she actually spoke at one of our Professional Speaking Association conferences a few years ago. But Patricia she's brilliant at opening talks. That's one of her specialties. She's really good at it. And so quite often people will start with a question, did you know that, X% of the population, blah, 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 whatever. And instead of did you know, just tweaking the words slightly can have an even more powerful effect. So for example, instead of did you know, you could, how often have you, or would it shock you to know that, would it concern you to know, would it interest you to know, rather than just did you know.
Yes.
And so I've taken some tips from Patricia in terms of it, just refining that opening, because it's so important. It's the most important part of your speech, apart from the ending.
Yes.
So you've got to hook people in early on. If you don't, it's very hard to keep their attention.
That's really, really useful. We should talk about the finish as well. Presumably, do you advocate calls to action, or what would your tip be for ending a speech?
Yeah, certainly. I think you've got to leave people with something. One of the techniques that I find is really works well is to bring it back around to however you opened it. So you top and tail it, and that
Yes.
really kind of puts it into a neat package, ties it up with a bow, and makes it easier for people to retain that information or the
Yes.
message. But yeah, I generally would make sure that there's some kind of call to action, even if it's just challenging people's thinking.
Yes.
Because otherwise, what's the point? Oh, that was a nice
absolutely.
story.
This isn't a sales pitch. This isn't a presentation. This is TEDx.
Yes.
And they're there to be challenged.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, really interesting. So one of the things that I do get my guests to think is to share 3 top tips. Now, in your case, it would be 3 top tips for TEDx. It could be something like, how do you prepare? How much practice do you need to put in? That sort of thing, which I'm sure
I think
people will do.
I actually have a formula for what I call a presentastic presentation, or if you're doing TED, I often use the phrase TED-tastic.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But I talk about 3 areas. So the first one is preparation, and with preparation, people quite often just get focused on preparing the content.
Yes.
Completely forget about preparing the rest of the things. So preparing yourself, preparing your mind for it. What are you doing to help manage the nerves and calm and bring the right attitude and the right energy to it? So what can you what are you doing with your mind? How do you prepare your body? Obviously, there's a huge amount that we can communicate through our body language and our gestures. And so how do you get your body in the best state to be able to gesture freely and openly? Thirdly is your voice. If you warm up your voice, and you obviously with your background, you'll be familiar with the concept of warming up your voice. But even before this podcast, I warmed up my voice because it was in the morning and my throat was a bit croaky. And interestingly, whether people perceive it consciously or not, if we have to clear our throat or, we feel a bit, people are making judgments about us based on how we're coming across with our voice. So some of the vocal things that I do are just simple things like humming or singing, doing some tongue twisters and that sort of thing. And you may have seen I do a tongue twister Tuesday. So every Tuesday I share a new tongue twister. And and even just sort of loosening up your shoulders and neck, because tension's the enemy of our voice. So we want to make sure that we're nice and relaxed. But also, so there's body, mind, voice, and the content, but finally the environment. So getting a really good understanding of what environment you'll be speaking in.
Yes.
Is it a small room? How will it be set up? Are you on a stage where there's raked seating, the audience are above you, or are you on a platform where the audience are below you? Will there be equipment used? Is there a microphone? If so, what type? And I know for myself, if I'm given a handheld microphone, because I gesture a lot, I feel like that cuts off half my ability.
Yeah.
So I always ask for a headset mic or a lapel mic if I can. But just being conscious of those sort of things are going to help you be more prepared. And it's really important to put time into thinking about that.
Now, I understand that with TEDx talks, there are run-throughs beforehand, or you get the opportunity to go on stage beforehand. Is that correct?
Yes, and once again, it depends on the organizer, but certainly all the ones that I've worked with have had a rehearsal period. The other thing that some of the ones that I've done, we've had a masterclass partway through where we get an invited audience of supportive people, and people get a chance to run through their talks, and then I'll facilitate feedback for them so that they can refine and enhance their talk from an audience perspective. And also it just gives them a chance to sort of because sometimes TEDx speakers have never spoken in public before or have very limited experience. So it depends on the event. That's just my experience. But yes, you would certainly get an opportunity to at least be on the stage, because they'll normally do a technical rehearsal.
Yes.
To make sure that everything's all right. And if you're using slides, then making sure that you have practiced with the clicker to advance the slides so it looks natural and easy. All of those sorts of things are so important for preparation. So, and preparation is my number one, I think, tip. If we're talking, what would you recommend? Then preparation, but not just getting stuck on preparing the content.
That's really interesting. I don't know if you know that I'm speaking at PSA London.
Yes, I did see that. Which is wonderful.
On fear. I'm terrified.
You're terrified. But the thing is, you know how to manage it.
I know, and that's what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah. And if you would have come across that phrase about everybody gets butterflies, the professionals get them to fly in formation.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's one of my favorite quotes, and I've never been able to find who actually said it originally, but it's a really lovely visual to think about your butterflies flying in formation.
But one of the things I'm going to flag up is self-sabotage.
Yeah.
The fact that the fear might make you avoid doing that practice or avoid checking your tech. So you've got that excuse.
Yes, you are absolutely right. And I have a lot of one-to-one clients who, when I dig deep, and because they'll come to me and say, I normally just wing it, and it is part of that. It is partly that. Oh well, if I've just winged it, then that's the reason it all went pear-shaped. It wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
But it does, and that's why I talk as part of preparation. It really is about preparing your mind.
Oh, definitely. Physically, mentally, knowing your content. Because that's the other thing. This will be coming out after the talk. Another thing that I'm going to bring up is the fact that a lot of people say, oh, I'm frightened. I need hypnotherapy, and they don't know what they're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you've come across that too.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting, but usually in my experience, when I'm working one-to-one with people, the fears are, some people carry around something, some incident that happened when they were at primary school where the
Yes.
kids laughed at them or something. And there's quite a lot of people who experience that. But normally it's imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So people feel like they're not good enough, or they're scared of being judged. Why would I, what if there's more senior people in the room, or people who know more than I know about the topic? And so quite often it is just about helping people think that through, and boosting their confidence in terms of the fact that they wouldn't have been asked to speak if people weren't interested on their take on something.
Yes.
And so everybody has a unique angle or experience or that they can share, that regardless of who's in the room, as long as they tailor that talk, and that's the key, is really understanding the audience and tailoring the talk to make it relevant, then there's no reason that people should be judging them.
Yes, absolutely. And if you have got that clarity in the opening, so you're engaging your audience, they're more likely to go with you.
Yes, absolutely. So that preparation is key. But then, you asked me for 3. My second one is about practice.
Right. Okay.
That the other thing is people don't practice enough, and they think they'll wing it, or they just read through it in their head. But until you actually practice it, and by practice I mean get on your feet and speak it out loud, because that's when you start to get the flow and understand how everything's hanging together, and whether you need to refine some of the phrasing. Also, you get a really good indication of the timing of it. You can't know how long something's going to take until you actually deliver it, and deliver it as you would be in front of an audience, rather than just in your living room speaking to the cat. Or is that just me?
I speak to a mirror.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Do that version. Or that, it's really, really good that you are saying this, because I agree with you. People don't practice enough. They think that reading through the notes is okay, but it isn't.
Yeah, and interestingly, this is relevant for all types of things. If you have a difficult conversation coming up, you don't want those words to be coming out of your mouth for the first time when you're in this high stakes situation in front of the person who you're having the difficult conversation with. It really helps to practice it and work out how you're going to say it.
Yes, absolutely. So your third.
Oh, my third, yes. So have you noticed that there's a bit of a theme here? They all start with P, and this third one is going to start with P as well. So we have preparation, practice, and finally passion.
Whoa!
And it's a bit of an overused word, and people freak out about the word passion. But honestly, unless you're passionate about what you're talking about, you can't expect anyone else to be. So that's the magic ingredients, I think, is you being enthusiastic and interested about what you're saying, because that then ripples into the audience, and people can't help but be engaged and drawn into that when people are passionate.
Absolutely. Just thinking about some presentations I've seen over the years, or worked with people that, on numbers and things like that, which is quite hard sometimes to be able to be passionate about data.
Yeah, but I've also seen people, who are totally passionate about data, and they're really good at communicating it effectively and making it relevant for the audience.
Yeah,
and I think that's the key.
Dr. Curtis, the one that from Stirling University, who does all of the data, or when there are polls and when there are elections, and he always gets it completely right. He's one of my absolute heroes, because he is so passionate about it. And actually it's quite a dry subject.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And people say, oh, I can't, my topic's boring. There are no boring topics. There are only boring speakers. Yeah. And so it's about finding what is interesting, because if you're bored with it, then that's going to make the audience bored with it. So
absolutely.
And your job as a presenter, whether you're doing a TEDx talk or you're doing any other presentation, your job is to engage the audience and communicate that message effectively, and draw them in.
Brilliant.
Persuade them.
Listeners,
another P. Persuade.
Listeners, you are going to love this, and I want you to really think about whether you'd like to give a TEDx talk or present in a slightly different way with some of the excellent stuff that Mel is sharing today. But before we finish, Mel, do say a little bit about what you do and how people could contact you if they want to do some work with you or find out more about your courses.
Sure. So I specializing in helping mainly entrepreneurs and business people to pitch and present with, and you said at the beginning, with more confidence, credibility, and charisma. And there are different ways I do that. I run masterclasses in organizations, and I also work one-to-one with people. So if anyone's interested in contacting me or finding out more, easily findable on social media. I'm on LinkedIn as Mel Sherwood. My website is melsherwood.com. And there are various different things. Actually, melsherwood.com/blog. I've written dozens and dozens and dozens of blog posts that are probably going to help your listeners with
fantastic. And do you have any offers or online courses that the listeners might be interested in?
Well, I've got at the end of all my blog posts, but I'll send you a link to it.
Thank you.
People can sign up for my top 5 tips.
Oh, fantastic!
Better speaker. So, and yeah, that it's a daily email for 5 days, and then there's a little bonus tip as well. So, if you're interested in that, I'll make sure that you get the link, Susan, and you can put it with the podcast. But otherwise, it's at the bottom of any of my blogs have a link to that as well. And then I've got an online challenge coming up called my Pitch-tastic online challenge, and that's for people who really need to refine their elevator pitch. Because one of the reasons I wrote my book and one of the reasons I do what I do is because I've seen so many people out and about, either at networking events or various conferences, where they're losing opportunities, losing credibility, and potentially losing money because they can't clearly and confidently explain who they are and what they do. And I think that's a real shame. So it's the reason I do what I do, and I love helping people. I've realized that that's one of my superpowers, Susan, which is very odd, but I'm great at simplifying things and making sure that to reduce, message in a short space of time. So sometimes you only get 30 seconds or a minute to share with people who you are and what you do, and you've got to grab their attention and get them interested. So even if what you're offering is not for them, it needs to be memorable and interesting, and so that people can go, oh, I know someone who needs to speak with you, even if they don't need what you're offering. So I'm running an online challenge. I'm looking for 100 people to join me for that. It's coming up we'll be launching it in October, and then it'll actually start in November. So I can send you some details for that. But if anyone wants to information about that, there's an opportunity to just sign up for updates on my website. So when you go onto my website, there'll be a little pop-up after about 5 seconds or so, and you can sign up there, and I'll keep you updated on all that's happening. And I'd love your listeners to join me on the online challenge. That would be fantastic. As I said, I'm looking for 100 people, and it'll be over 4 weeks. We'll look at, and I talk about 2 types of pitches. So the first one being what I call the conversational pitch, which is the very, very short answer to the question, what do you do? And so we look at that, and then we look at the sort of longer 30 to 60 second elevator pitch. And there'll be a Facebook group that people can get involved with and practice their pitch in a safe and supportive environment and get some feedback on it and refine it. And at the end, we'll anyone who wants to be take on the challenge can actually, we're going to have a pitch-a-thon at the end, so that people can get online and pitch their 1 minute, and then we'll have a little competition with a bit of a couple of prizes at the end as to who's come up with their best pitch. So it's not, and once again, it won't be just the wording of the pitch, but I'll cover things like how to make it more interesting in terms of how you prepare yourself, your mind, your body, your voice, to really enhance the delivery of that and get people engaged.
Brilliant. Oh, well, listeners, please join in this challenge. I will make sure that this goes out mid-October probably, so that there will be a chance for people to sign up. So that is a superb little challenge. So thank you very much for sharing that, Mel.
Well, thank you for letting me share it. It'd be great. I'd really love to have some of your listeners join. It would be wonderful.
Great. So it's time to finish now, because I know that you're a very, very busy lady. Thank you so much for sharing so many inspiring and invaluable tips on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and I wish your listeners all the best with their TEDx talks and any presentations that they're doing. I wish you all to be TED-tastic, pitch-tastic, or tastic.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. You were just listening to the Superstar Communicator show. Please leave a review on iTunes and make sure you head over to our website, executivevoice.co.uk, to subscribe to our newsletter on how to become a superstar communicator. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes where I'll share ideas to ensure you are never, ever underestimated, ignored, interrupted, or undervalued again.